What is going on, everybody? This is your boy, the Doghouse Show. We are officially live with the third episode of the Political Compass, guys. Tonight's going to be a really exciting night. We should be having different guests in, such as Ancom, SciCom. We should be possibly having some Sonsul in here. Tiberius will be joining us here shortly, as well as Wes Sisa. So we've got a full panel lined up for you guys. Guys, it has been an exciting week. We started off with the rhetoric. We saw some crazy stuff happen. We then moved in and saw some amazing economic numbers, which we will get into. And then we also saw some stuff going on with Israel and the walkie-talkie situation. We will talk about that, or pager. But we also have the other issue, which just yesterday, or today actually, Kamala Harris accepted the CNN invitation for a presidential debate. So we have had a lot of stuff going on over the past couple of days. So we'll be covering more of that on Tuesday, the Kamala Harris debate stuff, and we'll be covering some other topics as well. Tonight, we are going to be covering just a few different topics, but we are going to start the show promptly at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I just wanted to get some of you guys to come in here, see how you guys are doing. So let's just jump straight into this. Guys, for anyone who's just tuned in, this is the Political Compass, where we have reasonable people with reasonable conversations. We try to bring in everybody from different areas of the political spectrum. So tonight, there's not a whole lot of people from the right. We do have Tiberius here, who's kind of our little centrist, and he'll get into all this stuff center right. I won't label him centrist, but everybody will explain their political philosophies. But tonight we're going to have more left than we do right. We are searching, and we have a few people in line that are going to be on the right in the future. And so it's going to be pretty great when that time comes. But anyways, we will go ahead and start off with letting everybody introduce themselves, what their political philosophy is. And so Sonsul, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, buddy?
Sonsul, I was formerly a socialist. Now I'm a liberal. If we need someone to give some right-leaning opinions here, I'll steelman them the best that I can. But yeah, no, I'm mostly a liberal, and I like to talk about liberal things. You know, being really, really excited about woke video games and diversity and immigration. I just love all of it, 100%. No criticisms whatsoever. Yeah, also, Tiberius, if you could put on either a push to talk or like turn the noise gate on your phone.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah, it's just crackling a little bit. All right. So Ancom, I haven't talked to you. I don't think it's been a minute since we've talked.
It's been a while.
It's been quite a bit.
I think the last time I talked to you was probably in a VC and Lethe server. So
it's probably been a minute.
It's been as the name implies, anarchist communist, and I also really like science and all things to do with science communication and debunking pseudoscience bullshit and all that. So that's me.
Awesome. So with that, let's move on to Tiberius. Tiberius, let us know your political position and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's good to be back for episode 3, back among friends and some people I haven't seen in a while. Yeah, greetings all. As far as my politics, I'm a farm boy that went to college, and that's basically me in a short nutshell here. I've got some of those old-timey, conservative vibes that you're going to pick up from some folks, but also am educated. I understand shit. And then I look at MAGA and I'm like, you're all a bunch of dumbasses. So yeah, if you want like right-wing takes that aren't bad shit, I'm probably one of the guys you can go chat with. But we'll judge that whenever we get here, because I know it's too communist. So we'll see if I actually keep it together.
You can do it. I know you can. Wes, our other fellow commie over here. Go ahead, Wes. Introduce yourself, your political positions, and a little bit about yourself, buddy.
What's up, Wes? I go by Wes or Wesley. I guess I'm a leftist. I don't really necessarily prescribe to any particular label anymore. I'm from the IT and project management sector, and I don't know. I follow politics, but I'm not a huge fan of like the whole electoralism thing. I don't really give a shit that much. So when we talk about like Kamala and Trump, I'm there, but I don't really give a shit.
I feel you on that. All right, cool. Well, our first topic is one that I have a little bit of knowledge about, but there's a couple of people in here that I think have some more in-depth knowledge on this. So I'm going to kind of hand it off to them. The first topic is going to be about Israel and the recent events that happened this past week with the exploding electronics. I know a little bit about it, but I'm going to go ahead and let Wes kind of introduce us a little bit to the story, and we'll kind of just open it up for anybody who wants to jump in.
I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm, super well versed in any of this. I only have what we all know and what we've all seen. I just think that this is worth talking about, and I don't want to get into an Israel-Palestine thing. I just want to talk about these attacks specifically and what it means and what it looks like and what we should be talking about when we're talking about the idea that Israel paid a company to put plastic explosives into pagers and sold those to not only Hezbollah, but some regular citizens as well, and then detonated them while those people would be in. There's no way to determine where those people would have been. And that's really what I want to talk about, actually, is the fact that, to me, this is 100% a terrorist attack. They're like, if you cannot determine where your targets are going to be and you're going to set off like a couple thousand explosives at, I don't know, wherever these people live, then that's just a terrorist attack. That's you can't tell me you're the most advanced army in the world and you have no idea.
Ancom, you're coming through, breaking through a little bit, buddy. Yeah, all good. But yeah, Wes, I think that's the interesting thing is you talked. I know part of this is the idea of whether or not this was a terrorist attack by Israel. And I kind of looked this up a little bit. Let me see if I can find it on my phone. I actually found that the internet it's difficult to pin down like an international definition on what is or isn't a terrorist attack, but I did find that one of the international codes, let me see if I have it pulled up here. I do. It's 4.2 Security Council Resolution 1566, and it looks like they signaled it says faced with the backlash from human rights bodies and civil society in Resolution 1566 from 2004, Security Council eventually signaled its conception of terrorism as criminal acts including against civilians committed with the intent to cause death or serious bodily injury or taking of hostages with the purpose to provoke a state of terror in the general public or in a group of persons or particular persons, intimidate a population or compel a government or an international organization to do or to abstain from doing any act which constitute offenses within the scope of and is defined in the international conventions and protocols relating to terrorism. The problem I have is, where do we draw that line, right? Do we draw that line at any civilian that has been killed in a military operation? As a terrorist act?
Real quick.
Go ahead, Sanso.
Yeah. So the labeling something as a terrorist attack, it is really hard to like draw clean lines. There's going to be a lot of gray area in what people are going to define as a terrorist attack. I think that the easiest thing that I generally use in terms of a terrorist attack to label something as that is it A, targeting a civilian population predominantly, right? 2, is the goal to spread fear, terror in the population in order to pressure the government, like you were saying, like pressure the government to do something or to stop doing something or to never do something. Like that's what I would look at in terms of a terrorist attack. When it comes to these pager attacks and the radio attacks that happened 2 days later, I'm not sure if I would label them a terrorist attack. The way that I've been seeing people talk about it is this was supposed to be something that was like just in case, because these pagers were only purchased like 6-7 months ago, right? The reason that they set them off now seemed to be there was some kind of security leak that could have compromised the actual pager, like the explosive plan in the first place. And it was a use it or lose it type situation. Either we do it now or we'll never be able to use these pager bombs that we've set up in the future. I'm not sure if I would feel comfortable calling it a terrorist attack, because I don't think that the targets specifically were civilian. A, B, I don't think that there's a like specific, uh, like terror aspect associated with this, other than like we know where you are, And then like lastly, like in terms of what is the ultimate goal, honestly, it seems like these people have been lobbing bombs and missiles at each other back and forth. Like whether you think whoever you think started it or whatever I think that these were targeting specific military targets. And in terms of like what you were talking about, like where do we draw the line? If any civilian gets injured, if any civilian gets hurt, do we call that a terrorist attack? Obviously not. If there's a military strike and there's collateral damage, like that's really bad, and it should be minimized as much as possible, and that should be taken into account. If they didn't take that into account, or if there's like some kind of communication that comes out that's like, we hope that they're in the middle of, like big shopping mall Lebanon #1, then yeah, that would be really bad. But I don't think that seems to be what the target of the attacks was.
Yeah, Ancom, where do you sit on this, man? Because I know you
Yeah.
haven't spoken on this quite yet. Where do you stand on this?
So I had some issues with my sound, which you heard with the microphone.
Gotcha, yeah.
So I had to reset something. So I missed a little bit of what was said, but I heard most of what Sansol said there, and I kind of got the gist from Wes before I had the audio issues. So my stance is this. If it was Israel, which there seems to be a consensus within the intelligence community that it is, there's no direct evidence, and as far as I know, Israel has not confirmed. I don't know if they've specifically denied or if they've just
They
not
will
said
never.
anything.
It's their policy not to.
Yeah. Okay.
Neither confirm
So
nor deny.
yeah. So I think it's a decently safe assumption to say it probably was Israel. The problem I have with this is, much like Wes said, they didn't know where these devices were going to be when they set them off. Even if this was an oh shit button or, a just in case button, and even if this was a situation where they thought they were going to be discovered, so it was use or to lose it, the fact that they set it off indiscriminately, and that's the part that I have the biggest problem with, indiscriminate detonation. They didn't know where all of these were. They didn't know how many people were going to be harmed. In fact, the fact that they set off the walkie-talkies a day or two after the pagers went off, when, there were likely to be funerals and other bereavement actions being taken, tells me that civilian casualties were not only likely, but almost certain. So the fact that they went that far with such indiscriminate measures says to me, I don't know if you want to call this a terrorist attack, if we define a terrorist attack as, a measure which is meant to strike terror into a population to influence governmental change, given that Hezbollah is the ruling government of Lebanon last I checked. That seems fairly decently to be terrorist, or at the very least, an indiscriminate state-on-state violence, as it were. Either way, I don't see how anyone can defend this as, morally or ethically defensible, and I think condemning Israel for such a heinous attack in the strongest possible terms is really the only position I think, most reasonable people can take. Like, my curiosity here is, like, how can we separate this? Okay, I won't, because the intended targets were specifically governmental and military, I won't exactly compare it to the October 7th attack that Hamas made against Israel, but because there were mass civilian casualties and there was a very good expectation for Israel to have known that there would be mass civilian casualties as a result of this action, I don't see how I can morally distinguish this from just an indiscriminate terror attack. The fact that it was done by a state and targeted military seems less relevant than the overall impact and the likelihood that they knew what the impact would be.
Wes, you wanted to jump in for a second on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with a lot of what Ancom is saying right here. Like that's completely how I feel about it. I feel like it is okay to take that next step and go ahead and call this terrorism because I think it is so predictable that there would be civilian casualties, and the lack of forethought for that is is what makes it like terrorism. Just like the forethought that is what makes it first degree murder.
Well, this is the thing I want to jump in on this. Has it been confirmed? And Tiberius, feel free to jump in, buddy, because I know you probably itching to talk. So I'll let you jump in after I say this real fast. Has there been any confirmation that there has been a civilian that I know has been impacted by this? But I'm talking about in their vicinity. Because, for example, when I watched the one video in the supermarket, there was a person standing right next to the guy with the pager, and he didn't even suffer, like, from what I could tell, any shrapnel wounds. It looks like the only one that really got hit the most was the guy that was directly having the pager. So do we have any confirmation that there was any civilian that was within range of these pagers going off that actually ended up suffering any major injuries? It seems like everybody who had gotten them were holding them.
There are at least 3 confirmed dead civilians. I think 2 of them are kids.
But I think 2 of them. Go ahead, Tiberius. Go ahead, jump in.
I got a couple things here. As far as technical details, I haven't heard anything that I either like am going to say no. We can confirm no. There's a bit of speculation in there, but long story short, most of the details are right. It looks like there was a Taiwanese manufacturing company. Somehow, it looks like, not confirmed, Mossad was able to get their hands on about 3,000 pagers plus. They loaded them with some low-level passive explosives, and they sent some kind of carrier signal to the pagers that allowed them to have an electric charge, which set off the passive explosive. That's the theory. That is not confirmed. Just putting that out there. As far as like confirmed casualties, I know one of the first confirmed casualties, unfortunately, was an 8-year-old girl. There's just a level where we all probably know that she was literally going, "Daddy, Daddy, your pager's going off," and it blew up on her. Like, that's probably exactly how that happened. There's definitely civilian casualties here. And as far as where I'm at, I don't think that the civilian targets or civilian indiscriminate targeting is what labels this as terrorism. What I think is the actual goal here. And I'm going to actually go out with the hardest take here, even though I'm more pro-Israel than probably anyone here. This not only is terrorism, it may be the most successful terrorist attack ever. Because what the entire point of terrorism is to get you scared of doing something. And where are we at right now? Now they're making Hezbollah scared to use their communications. That's critical. Like, I'm actually expecting that we're going to see an invasion here literally any hour. Because this is the number one thing you want to do before you take on a military strike on a governmental infrastructure. You make everyone scared to pick up the goddamn phone. So I'm just kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens. But if this was just the preamble to something greater, it is probably the most successful strike I have ever seen before that happens. So I'll be shown if I'm vindicated here within the next couple of days, because we'll see something major if I am. But the general part here is that either A, it is just blatant terrorism because they don't want the bad guys talking, or B, it is the terroristic attack that leads up into the preamble of, oh, Lebanon's getting invaded again. So that's where I'm at personally. If anyone wants to haggle with me on that, that's fine. But yeah, actually, this is definitely terrorism. Definitely terrorism.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ancom.
So I actually agree with Tiberius. This, based on what I'm reading, this sort of tactic is most typically done as a prelude into a major military incursion. So the fact that it has been, 3 days at this point, and we have not seen a major military action by Israel or anyone else against Lebanon is honestly a little surprising, given the nature of the attack and like what it tends to lead up to. And so one of the articles I was reading off the Washington Post was mentioning that there were just a ridiculous number of layers of shell companies upon shell companies to try and disguise the source of the pagers from those in Hezbollah who were purchasing them, which implies that there are probably going to be a lot of middlemen here And if Hezbollah actually manages to get their organization together quickly enough and starts investigating this, there are probably going to be a lot of these middlemen who probably had no idea what was going on, who are going to end up being targeted, because obviously Hezbollah is not going to believe them that they had no idea what was going on here. So if Israel doesn't, actually capitalize on this in a military maneuver, then it's very likely there are going to be a very large number of civilian casualties for this by Hezbollah. But I would think that Israel would have a pretty significant, responsibility for this if they cannot stop it beforehand. Like if they don't capitalize on this, then there would seem to be a significant gap in their tactics that are going to lead to a lot more losses of people not responsible. But the numbers that I can find as far as the attacks, the pager attack led to, at least according to this article, which was published earlier today, 2,800 wounded and at least 12 dead in the initial pager attack. And then the second wave with the radios killed at least 25 people and injured 450. I would have a very difficult time believing every single one of those people was Hezbollah or Hezbollah related, especially since a lot of them are children. Like, we know this for a fact.
Yeah.
The article
So
I'm reading is showing like 4 children.
Well,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
also we have to keep in mind, and this is something that I kind of wanted to bring up as well, is that Hezbollah is also the government. Like,
It's
so
okay.
when
Hold on.
when
There's,
when
there's
you say that
a
when
slight
you
difference. There's a slight difference. Hezbollah
Well-
is not the government. They're the largest party in the government.
right, they're a
And
governmental
the Lebanese
party.
government seems to have like they're tolerating them because they have so much power, but they're not like, we love Hezbollah. Like, the Lebanese government doesn't seem to love Hezbollah. The Lebanese government
Right.
seems to be subservient to Hezbollah because Hezbollah is backed by Iran, has the second largest stockpile of missiles in the entire world. Even like I think they're second only to the United States in terms of how many missiles they have aimed straight at Israel. There's just a
the
couple
point,
of things that I just need to like.
the
and you
point
can
is that
respond to every part of this.
they control governmental policy both
You're-
on
okay.
Yeah,
the
but that's not a
domestic
good
and the
thing.
international
You're
level.
not-
Sanso, were you finished? I want to make
No,
sure.
I
Sanso-
just
Okay.
yeah, and I'm totally interrupting Wesley here, and I
It's okay,
apologize
yeah.
for that. But there's a couple of things that you guys have, like, all three of you guys have said that I'm just like not sure if I can get behind. Like, we're talking about, like, this is probably the preamble. I can agree with you guys. Probably the preamble to some kind of larger conflict, but not necessarily. Like, we can see all of these like traded back and forth attacks between Hezbollah, like, to Israel, Israel to Hezbollah, for Iran, for like all of these places around the Houthis. Like, this is something that has been going on. And when we look at international relations, something that you notice, especially over the past like nearly a year since the Israeli Gaza war started, there's constant like little back and forths without ever officially declaring war, without explicitly escalating to the point where you're invading. There's little tits for tats in foreign policy and in international relation. Okay, well, some Iranian-backed duders launch some missiles at the United States. We blow the up out of those dudes, right? And that's a tit for tat. No one was concerned that we were going to invade Iran necessarily because of that instance, right? Now, this is obviously a larger attack, and I can't really get behind the idea that this is a terrorist attack just because of the imagery that brings about and the goals that are implicit within that. And the last
Okay,
thing,
but I
the very
yeah,
last
go-
thing,
go,
yeah,
last one.
is Israel didn't bomb Lebanon first. It was Lebanon that bombed Israel first, to the point where they had to evacuate like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people from the north of Israel. Like, Hezbollah started this whole thing. Let's not pretend like Israel is just like this big, like, there's some shades of gray in Gaza, but like with Lebanon, like, they started literally every single part of the escalation that's happened with Israel. So I'm totally interrupting, but like, I'm getting
It's
a little
okay.
bit triggered.
No,
Go ahead.
I want. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we're going a little bit far because the whole history thing is like
Yeah.
I try to get away from that because I know what rabbit hole that goes down. And so when I look at just this specific one, I want Tiberius to jump in right after I get my word in on this.
Well, I interrupted Wesley. I'm sorry. I just
yeah. I know Tiberius is probably itching to talk. Tiberius, something else I want to mention too is I noticed your audio was a little scuffed when you were talking. I don't know if it's because you're on your car speaker or whatnot, but I just want to mention that. The other thing I want to say is that when I look at this, the idea, and this ties into what Wes was saying, when it comes to Hezbollah being part of the government, I think we're kind of ignoring the big glaring part, which is that, like Sansel said, to piggyback off of him, they're lobbing missiles at Israel. So it's not like they're just some kind of like MAGA party, right? They're an active aggressor.
I hate to interrupt you, but as Sansel correctly said, he did interrupt me, and I never even got to finish my point.
Go ahead. Yeah. Let's go ahead. Yeah,
I'm not mad at you for interrupting me. I'm always happy to hear it, but I wanted to finish my point, which is that they are a governmental party, and I want us all to think about what this would be like, no matter what you think. Let's say it's the leftists of America. Let's say it's the conservatives of America. If you put pagers into one of the political parties of America, and those pagers ended up blowing off, let's say it's Republican senators' arms, and
let's be very careful on how close we get to the sun on this too, because I don't know. This topic already is pretty. Yeah.
No, this is all hypothetical. But if this were to happen to in America to one of their political parties, because you got to keep in mind that Hezbollah is a political party. So when you say that someone is Hezbollah, you're not necessarily talking about a terrorist. You could be talking about a city comptroller, someone in like a low-level administration type job. So like the fact that this was just targeted at very broadly at Hezbollah and not at specific military, like we use the term collateral damage, but like collateral damage is like when somebody's wife and kids are on a military base, when you attack that military base and you accidentally kill the wife and kids that were on that military base. This is completely different. Like this is literally just targeting random government employees basically, and not determining that they are at a military function. They're not doing anything militarily related. You're just blowing up people in that governmental party. And that, like that's why I wanted to bring up like Hezbollah being a part of the government. It's more than that. It's just the fact that like when you start targeting that entire part of the government, you're not targeting just the terrorists. You're targeting random people too. Like Hamas has a function of their government that is to count the dead and to like keep track of health records. And like you can kill those people, but you're just killing bean counters. Like you're not killing terrorists. And yes, they might be part of Hamas, but like they're not militants.
I want Tiberius to jump in, and I might have something to say right after this. So go ahead, Tiberius. I know you haven't had your chance to speak, so go ahead and say what you needed to say, buddy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm going to try to sit back for a minute. I know my mic is scuffed. It's just I'm kind of in areas I can't really get much better than this.
You're all good,
I
buddy.
apologize for that.
It's not that bad.
As far as where I'm at, I think the problem here, and this really goes, sorry, let me just frame it this way. The general problem here with this conversation is that, do you believe in political corporatism? Do you believe that by guilt of association that you are a target of a militaristic attack? Should that be allowed, or should that person be allowed? It's very clear here that at least the Israelis were intending to go after Hezbollah, but of course there were other people who were going to get on the sidelines. Do you have a problem with that? Do you have a problem with the fact that all of these people or all these pagers could have gone to Hezbollah and then Hezbollah gave it out to anyone that they liked? Does that mean they're all a legitimate target? I'm going to let you all figure that one out in your own politics, because that's a serious moral quandary. What the problem is here is that I don't want to openly outright agree with Sansel, but this is Tuesday in the Middle East again. This is just the same old tit for tat that we've been seeing. I have seen it literally since I was a kid, where you had the Antifadas, and then you had the last time Lebanon got invaded back in 2006 or 2008. It's just, for me, this is kind of normal. I would hate to put it in that regard, but it's just normalized to me. The question is, like, do you believe that X people are legitimate targets? And from there, do you support a particular side? I'm 100% on board with the conversation that Israel isn't really our friends, but I'm definitely not on board with the conversation that anybody else in the region are people that we like.
Yeah, and I want to. So what I wanted to. Are you done there, Tiberius? I want to make sure I don't cut you off there, bud. Okay.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So something I wanted to mention that I think that. Let me ask you this, Wes. If the facts changed, and this goes to Ancom as well. So I kind of right now, it looks like there's the dividing line right there with Wes and Ancom and us three. But I wanted to ask you guys, when it comes to what if that shipment, okay, was part of the military section or military sect of Hezbollah, right? I get what we're saying here, and I understand now what you're trying to say, Wes, which is, oh, well, Hezbollah has kind of different factions. Sure, but what if those pagers were meant for the delivery to this military faction of Hezbollah? And it wasn't just like, hey, these are your governmental pagers, guys, just hand them out to everybody, but it was actually targeted specifically to that particular group of Hezbollah, the military part of that. Would that change your equation a little bit?
I'll even give Israel the benefit of the doubt here, which I almost never do. But I will even say that, I don't know, let's say that they tried that, or that was the goal. I don't care. It didn't work. Like, in regards to the, like, oh, use it or lose it, like, we might not be able to do this in a month from now, so we just did it. That's not an excuse to me. Like, that is.
I want to give Ancom a minute to speak here. Ancom, do you have anything you wanted to comment on all these? Yeah, go ahead.
So your hypothetical to me doesn't really change things, because at the end of the day, it's less about who was targeted and more about who was impacted. So even if Israel or whoever, I'll even go so far as to say Israel has not been conclusively proven to be the aggressor in this case, right? So I'll just go ahead and say whoever arranged this, even if they had gone to every possible length to make sure only military or militant targets had received the particular electronics in question, they still executed the attack in such a way as it was very likely many civilians were going to be harmed, right? That is the problem with having a large number of these devices spread all around. Let's even say they were somehow limited just to Beirut, right? It was still, you had hundreds of these devices, possibly thousands. I don't remember the exact number, spread all around the city. You have to assume that some significant fraction of them are likely to be in locations where there are a lot of civilians. I think you mentioned, Doghouse, earlier that we have a video of this going off in the middle of a grocery store, right?
Correct.
It's not as if whoever set this up had tracking on every single one of those and knew exactly when every single one was going to be located in a military target. Right?
Exactly.
Can I want to bump in here for a little bit, and Sanso, feel free to jump into it at any point. I think for me though, I've watched the videos, and in two instances, we saw one where there was a man looked like he was trying to pick some fruit, and he ended up, I think he was holding his bag or satchel or something in his front part. And there was a gentleman standing right next to him. And when that pager went off, it didn't even impact the guy that was literally standing right next to him. And there was another video where the guy was at a checkout line, and I say humorous, but it's really not that humorous. His pager goes off. He looks down at it, and kaboom. But the thing is just like the fruit stand video, there was another gentleman that was standing right there. And so it seems as if these charges were very small enough to cause not obviously like an IED or anything where it just completely obliterates the person, but enough to kind of send that shrapnel just within range, where if it's right on your person, it's going to actually explode onto you and cause that shrapnel. So that's the thing that I get is when I'm like listening to these things about the civilians, my question is okay, let's add this to the equation. What if those that were injured via only because of the pager being on them, as opposed to civilians that were, for example, like a bombing, right? We've seen this many times where Israel will bomb a building, right? That one you could argue is far more indiscriminate as opposed to having a pager on you, and the only person who is injured in that attack is the individual that has the pager on them, as opposed to the civilians around them.
And I'm not.
All right, so if
just
we
to the point that we
go ahead.
like
Go ahead,
this could
Sansa.
be attacking like comptrollers and stuff. Like I'm reading through like 4 articles right here, and like the only thing that I can find in terms of like I'm not seeing anything about there being like civilian wings of Hezbollah being targeted. It seems like here's like the operative sentence that I'm looking at. There's a whole paragraph, but Hezbollah officers, he ordered, had to carry pagers at all times, and in the event of war, pagers would be used to tell fighters where to go. So it seems like these pagers were like given to military staff. I don't know if a comptroller would be like ordered to go to war, and if he was, then he would be part of the combatant like group of people.
That's not saying that that's where all of them went, though.
I mean,
Like,
do
I'm
you have
looking at
anything
the
that
same
goes?
article as you, but the language that you just gave me is
Well,
very
it says
vague.
Hezbollah officers. No, actually, it's incredibly not vague. It says Hezbollah officers, which would imply some kind of military office, right? Ordered had to carry pagers at all times, and in the
Doesn't.
event of, well, hold on, the
Yeah,
second
Wes,
half of
let
the
it go.
sentence.
Let's
In the
Sansa go.
event of war, pagers would be used to tell fighters where to go. Like, do you have something that like talks about there being?
That doesn't mean that in the event of an emergency, that city comptrollers wouldn't be notified via pager. Like,
Why would a
I'm not
comptroller
saying
be
you're
told where to
wrong.
go? Well,
Like,
do you have
I'm not
anything
saying
that
you're
would
wrong,
say?
but what you're
Right.
saying is like,
Well, I
you're-
would 100% agree with you. It's just like do you have anything that would like say? Do you have anything that says that there were like civilian wings of Hezbollah that had these pagers? Because like I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm fairly pro-Israel in terms of like the October 7th war, but I have like heavy criticisms of the way that they've engaged in Gaza. There could be something to criticize here. I haven't been like following this story super closely, except for like how they possibly could have done it, right? In terms of like the outcomes or anything. Like, I could be easily pushed to like say like, yeah, this was probably a really bad like attack. This was a really bad thing that they
I
did.
mean, we need to be cognizant of
Yeah, go ahead.
Hasbara and that we're constantly like victims of Hasbara. We like
I'm literally just reading New York Times and Washington Post and
Yeah,
the Associated Press.
none of those are going to give you a like.
Okay,
Those are all
okay. So
filtered through Hasbara.
I don't know if that is.
Yeah, go ahead, Ty. Go ahead. I want you to jump in.
Okay,
Ty. What you got?
so like unironically, the steel man from the Israelis is largely what Sansa was saying, where the steel man from Hezbollah is largely what Wes is saying. So let me kind of cut the bullshit out for a minute. This is not a surgical strike. I wish I could say it was, and even if you said that it had a 90% effectiveness in getting to the people it was supposed to go to, which there's a damn decent chance of that, and I could go into the details on that later, is this discriminate enough to actually count as any kind of surgical strike? I don't think it is. It's still incredibly indiscriminate. The issue is that the general like narrative that Israel's putting out correct, where they know that most people who are using these pagers were at least associated with Hezbollah in one way or another, because that's who was giving out the pagers, right? That's where they gave them to. There really is a part here where, do you consider someone affiliated with Hezbollah that might be in a civilian office as a legitimate military target? I personally do. Wes does not. That's where we're going to disagree. I don't know where Sansa is on this one.
I mean, like, in terms of like surgical strikes, I'm not going to say that this is a surgical strike. There's thousands of these pages, it seems like, or hundreds at least. Like, it's certainly not surgical, but it's closer to surgical than like trying to like bomb any, like if they had instead of putting explosives in them,
That's where
put
I was going.
GPS. Like they could have, like, if they put GPS in and like try to shoot missiles at each one of these positions, it probably would have been significantly worse. But like until I'm given a reason to believe that this was worse than what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from people that have both on the ground reporting and like first or second hand accounts or interviews or stuff like that, like, I'm probably not going to be moved off the position unless I'm given some kind of like let's say that like of the 2,800 people that were injured in the first strike, if 90% of those people that were injured were Hezbollah, officers, I'm not sure if I cared that much, right? Like Wesley brought up the example, like what if it was like the Republican Party? I mean, I don't think that it would be good. I'd probably be pretty mad that someone attacks people in my country. But if the situation was like exactly the same, we've been trading missiles back and forth, I would just see it as a military attack, like based off of everything. Yeah.
And I can give a similar analogy here to and I'm going to watch how I use this word because I'm on 3 different platforms and I have no idea they're TOS. But there is a particular party from the 1940s in a particular country that had, I hope that was clear to everybody who understands where I'm going with this, in Germany, who ended up having different military sects of their political party, which was pretty hotly combative. So what I'm trying to get at is we have a political group similar to that example, and we have a very military sect of that party. And I think that if we look at it, I think to me, I don't know how you can get much more surgical than this. If you were to have, like Sansa was saying, if we were to have what Israel likes to do, which is throw 1,000-pound bombs or whatever you want to call them at a building, I would say that's far more indiscriminate than a little tiny pager that's on somebody's person that it seems like, from all accounts I can tell, it doesn't seem like anybody around them, at least from the videos I've seen and accounts I've heard, has been affected other than the person who was essentially having the pager on them. So I think it's kind of like if anybody's seen the movies where they have like those little buttons and they click it and then it's on their neck and then it kills them. It's similar. That's what it feels like to this. Yeah, go ahead, Wes. I'll let you go ahead. Yeah,
because I just don't think that that's a valid comparison. Like, you've both talked about like 1,000-pound bombs on cities, or like how they are handling like Gaza or even the West Bank now, and that's not valid comparison. Like, yeah, sure, it's better than dropping 1,000-pound bombs on civilian cities, but anything is better than that. That's a genocide. So like, how are to sit here and be like, oh yeah, well, like it's more strategic than dropping bombs on civilian blocks. It's
okay.
Of course.
So one thing I want to say.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Just because the contention here, at least with what Doghouse is saying, is the limited nature of the collateral damage, right? What I'm seeing, and mind you, I have not seen the specific videos which you've been referencing.
For sure.
However, the descriptions I'm seeing in the New York Times indicate that these were powerful enough to send adult men flying off motorcycles and slamming into wall. So, like, the specific instances where you saw a video where, it was in someone's pocket or bag, or maybe they were holding it and there was something standing right next to them, they just didn't happen to have any serious injury in the video. Again, I haven't seen it.
No, I get it. I get it. If that's what you're hearing, that they blew somebody off the motorcycle, I would absolutely agree with you. And I think that's important too. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, the person
doesn't
in
take
in
that
this
much
case,
to blow someone off.
Yeah, the person in this case who was riding the motorcycle very well may have been a militant. I don't know. The point is less about who specifically had the pagers to me, and it's more about the fact that, granted, I don't know what kind of explosive was used. New York Times says, like, they were laced with a few ounces of explosive, but depending on the kind of explosive, that can still be a huge explosion. And it's not just about the shrapnel, it's about the pressure wave that the explosion creates and how much internal damage that can do, even at a fairly close range. You know, if you're 10 feet away from a fairly powerful explosive, even if it's just a few ounces, you may not have any outward evidence of injury, but you could absolutely have like a ruptured spleen or a burst lung, whatever, because that's how pressure waves work. So the fact that like maybe they looked fine in the video doesn't mean that there weren't invisible injuries that they later realized and like had to be dealt with, and those are being counted. The problem is, like, we don't have a lot of information, but it seems highly likely, at least from my perspective, that regardless of who these were given to, who they were distributed to, there were almost certainly unintended civilian casualties. Or I say unintended, I should go with, no, unintended, but that the likelihood of such civilian casualties in such a widespread attack is high enough that I consider it morally reprehensible to have committed the attack in this particular way. With the radios, it seems there were fewer of them, they were more highly targeted, there was less overall damage outside of the targeting. Not saying that that's necessarily better, but it's less bad, I guess. But the pagers, okay, so I don't know why this comparison is coming up in my head. I don't even remember which one it was from, but I remember reading a Star Wars novel, like one of the extended universe novel, decades ago. And in it, one of the major plot points was the big bad of the story had rigged droids all across the galaxy to explode. And that was like a way of taking out, these large governmental things of the New Republic. I think it was, I don't remember the exact details, but the point is that like the kind of attack is extremely similar, swap droids for pagers, and it's not that much different. And like the massive amount of damage that was able to be done in such a widely distributed attack, certainly highly effective if you don't give a shit about civilian targets. But like you're comparing it to like dropping a 1 kiloton bomb. Well, if all of these had
kilotons pretty big, okay? That's like
I'm sorry,
fucking fat man shit.
my apologies. I meant to say 1 ton. My brain's a kiloton.
You're all good.
My apologies. If you were dropping a bomb that has the equivalent of 1 ton of TNT, you could probably say with modern explosives, the few ounces of explosive in these pagers was at least 1 pound of TNT each, and there were thousands.
Oh, it was far less than that. Yeah, I'll tell you, it was like, I think it was
TNT is going to do way more shit.
That dude will be gone. He'll be vaporized. I'll tell you, I think what it was like 1 ounce. Or 2 ounces. I think it was like relatively small.
It's not a lot, but the thing that I think you have to keep in mind is that because they were so indiscriminate with when and how this got set off, that you could be driving home your family in your station wagon and your pager gets exploded and you kill your entire family in a car crash.
Did that happen?
No, okay, so hold on. So here's what we're going to do. I would love to continue this conversation, okay? But we've spent almost 53 minutes on this conversation. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere. Yeah, so I think what we're going to do is we are going to move on. We are going to move on to the next topic. So I know it's a subtle, like almost like a pager just went off in the entire Discord, but we're going to go ahead and move on. So let us go ahead to the next topic. We're not going to, I'm cutting it off with anybody giving an end statement. Okay. That's how we're going to roll with it. Okay. We're just going to keep rolling. We are going to be doing an open call-in. This is a good point to let everybody know we are doing an open call-in after the show. It looks like we're probably going to be stopping at around the 8:15 mark, 8:15-ish. or 8:20. We're going to keep it kind of short and sweet. And if anybody wants to jump in on Collins, I'm more welcome to, and we can pick up where we left off with this conversation. So the next topic we are going to talk about is the recent economic news. There has been a lot of economic news coming in. We've seen inflation going down. We have seen that the rate cuts are being implemented. A lot of people are saying that these rate cuts are political in nature. And where I stand on this, and despite a lot of my fellow friends on the right, I think this is great news for Biden and Harris. And after all the evidence that I have looked into, I think they have done an amazing job with the economy, given the shit bag they have been given by Donald Trump from 2020 that a lot of conservatives love to forget about. To any of my conservatives out there in my chat, please go to 2020 and look at the $2 trillion stimulus packages that were passed by Donald Trump. So much so, and you might say, well, Donald Trump didn't want them or it was a pandemic. I don't care. Donald Trump wanted to put his name on a check, if you remember that correctly. A lot of people tend to memory hole 2020. I don't forget. So guys, you let me know, guys, what do y'all think about this economy news and what what that does for Harris and even maybe what it does for Trump? What do y'all think? Anybody want to take the torch on this one? Sansel, go ahead.
Sure. I think that like it as a humbly a liberal, I am kind of blown away by what the Biden-Harris administration has been able to do. The entire time that they've been in office, the amount of consensus they were able to build in both the House and the Senate to get multiple incredibly large and impactful policies through, all of them having to do with the economy. The infrastructure bill and stuff like that. I think that the fact that we're seeing rates being lowered by the Fed at this point is probably a testament to that. We can look at the inflation that happened across the entire world. We seem to get it under control faster than other places, and now we can start opening it up a little bit more than we have been. The economy's been doing pretty good for the past year, so I think this is great for Harris in terms of the race. Yeah.
All right, Ancom, what were you gonna? I know you wanted to bump in at the same time, Sansel. What you got?
That's fine. I mean, overall, the economic news seems overall to be fairly positive. Mind you, I tend to look at this, as I'm sure Wes does, from more of a worker-centric view. But, looking at this, the fact that inflation seems to be relatively low, the fact that job numbers seem to be going up, all of this, overall, I'd say this does tend to bode well for the Biden-Harris administration. The legislative accomplishments that they've managed to get passed through to kind of help spur a lot of this along has been good. So, I'm overall not terribly disappointed with it. I'm always skeptical about how much credit any presidential administration can take for economic changes, because yes, while they do have some influence, a lot of those changes, I'd say they have maybe a 20% influence, whereas the other 80% is just the rest of the economy, more generally the private sector in particular. So I think that the amount of credit we can give to them is lower than I think a lot of people might want to give to them. But on the other hand, that means the amount of blame we can assign to them in bad economic times is similarly relatively small. And that's one thing that's always bothered me about ascribing economic changes to a presidential administration. Is so yes, they have an impact through various legislative and executive policy, but I don't think the impact is as large as people tend to try to give them credit or blame for, and that's always bothered me just a little bit.
Absolutely. Tiberius, what are your stance on this economic news coming out this week about the Fed cutting their rates? What are your stances on that?
Yeah, a couple of ones. And if I lose you guys, I'm sorry. I'm kind of in the mountains in central Indiana.
Don't rub it in. Come on, don't rub it in.
Yeah, long story short, touching grass. I don't believe that most administrations have jack shit to do with improving the economy. And if they are, they're literally the final piece of the puzzle, as in they literally signed it into law. I don't blame Trump for some of the better years between 2016 and 2019. I think we're riding the high of the business cycle. I don't blame him largely for the collapse of the business cycle and COVID. I don't blame Biden for crashing anything, and I don't blame Biden for getting us out of anything. All this is kind of normal, actually. Is there some things I like from both administrations that I think are good for the economy? Yes. Not very many, unfortunately. I wish there was more. When it comes down to it optically, just for like the know nothing who's going to be trying to decide their election this year, yeah, there's going to be a couple of people who are going to think that this is a better sign for Kamala, and they might decide to vote for her. I think there's going to be some people who are like, oh, it's just politics, and they're going to vote for Trump more because, oh, well, it just happened under a Democrat now, which is bullshit. I don't think it really matters, honestly, and in fact, it might even backfire. Having the interest rates go down might even have housing costs go up higher than it already is somehow. But honestly, I can't even explain where it is right now. So long story short, be careful what you wish for, because this is one of those that can definitely come back to bite you.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
with regards to the housing costs, and sorry to cut in real quick, but this is
Yeah.
something I wanted to mention earlier.
Yeah, I wanted to get Wes's opinion on this too before we started just kind of throwing it around, because I don't think Wes has had a
No, I'm cool to hear what
Okay.
Anticom has
Okay,
to
go
say.
ahead, Ann. All right.
Yeah, so the reason, at least like when I first heard about the interest rate cut, the reason to me that it seems like this might end up driving housing prices a little higher is kind of a multi-step process. Lowering interest rates, makes it easier for people to get home loans. That increases overall buying power for a population that I think at this point is trying to buy a home, especially the younger generation who's been pretty significantly lagging behind previous generations in terms of home ownership. So easier ability to buy homes increases the demand which results in a overall reduction of supply, which will probably tend toward increasing home prices. That's how I see it anyway. Whether or not I'm correct, I have no idea. That's just kind of my intuition on it. So that's where I see things going as far as the housing market. Now, as someone who would eventually love to be able to buy a house, this may ultimately end up being a good thing for me, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to take advantage of this latest rate cut. I'm certainly a few years out from that process myself, at least. But I'm hoping to find I'm wrong. I would love to see the housing market, if not crash, get set down to a more reasonable, set point where more people who actually want to own their own homes are able to do so.
Well, let me say this, because I think this is my thing. When I look at the interest rate going lower, I think it's great. There's a lot of economic indicators that I think a lot of people overlook. So right around 2021, we saw inflation starting to do this number. Okay, and I think it's important. There's two things when you talk about does the president influence the economy? I think he absolutely does, or she. Okay, hopefully Kamala 2020 here. Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, put Cowboys for Harris. I'm starting it today. Anyways, I think the one thing to look at is there was a stimulus package passed in December. And after I looked at it a second time, I said, I think both presidents had a hand in it, but to differing degrees. So in December of 2020, Trump passed a stimulus package, only to then be followed in January as President Biden took office to then pass another stimulus package. What this, I think, did was it absolutely shot up inflation dramatically, because we had two very large stimulus packages be injected into the economy, a massive amount of money, especially because I think the third stimulus package had stimulus checks involved with it. The other thing is we had in those stimulus packages unemployment assistance. A lot of people forget about that part. There was unemployment assistance that gave out money as well. And that ended up shooting up the money. So there's more money, but prices hadn't had a chance to catch up. And so what do? They finally started to go up. And in fact, there's a really interesting chart where you can see that around early first quarter or second quarter of 2020, wages went up, and also followed thereafter in the first quarter of 2021, inflation shot up. So it was kind of a delay effect, right?
Yeah, one of the things about inflation is, yes, injecting money into the supply, into circulation is going to increase inflation, especially at a time like right after COVID and opening things back up, where we have too much money chasing too few goods, right? This is what causes the inflation. I agree with some things that Ancom and what Tiberius said. In terms of what a president can do for the economy, it really ain't much. It really ain't much. I think that is slightly different when it comes to advocating for policies, though, and with negotiating as the chief diplomat of the United States, as the leader of the party that they're representing while they're in office. That does take a lot. The only thing, and what we can see with that is, when we look at the economic policies that got passed under, let's say, the Trump administration and the Biden administration, just because those are the two I'm most familiar with. If I was a little bit older, I would probably be able to point towards more that happened during the Obama years. But during the Trump administration, there was one major piece of economic policy that got passed through Congress, through the Senate, signed by Donald Trump, and that was his tax plan.
Yep.
Right? Under the Biden-Harris administration, yeah, do they have direct control over the economy? No, absolutely not. They really don't, outside of a few executive actions that they can do and advocating for the Fed to raise or reduce rates, even though they don't directly control that. But what they can do is that they can go through, they can help negotiate, they can prod and rattle people into voting for something, into supporting it. And it seems like that's what especially Biden was able to do. Biden's goal going into being the president of the United States was, I want to build a consensus and I want to do things through the Congress. I want to do things through the Senate. And that's what he did. And that bears out in the fact that we had so many major pieces of legislation. If it was one thing, if it was just that big omnibus bill at the beginning of his administration because it was COVID and shit had to be done, there wouldn't be that much credit that you could give to him, right? But these are explicit policies
give
that he was.
that credit to Nancy Pelosi as the whip.
I mean, Nancy Pelosi was also probably a big part of that too, right? But Nancy Pelosi was also in office during the Trump years, and she was also in office during the Obama years, right? I think the biggest change here that we can see is that Biden was in office. Biden had his explicit goals of working with both Democrats and Republicans and trying to build consensus. And if Nancy Pelosi could have done that during the Trump years, if she could have done that during the Obama years, we would have seen that. But we don't see the massive, multiple massive pieces of economic legislation, like infrastructure bill, that every single president of my entire lifetime since the 90s has tried to get done. No other president has been able to do it, right? Do you think that Nancy Pelosi could have done that by herself, or?
No, Nancy Pelosi's just been a force in politics for the last 30 years.
Oh, sure, I won't disagree with that.
Yeah, that's all I was saying, is that even under Obama, Obamacare wouldn't have gotten done without Nancy Pelosi. I don't like Nancy, but to discount her as a force in democratic politics is.
To be clear, I'm not trying to discount any lawmaker's role in any of this. It's just that the very big change that we can see is the administration in the White House that had explicit goals to do these things. Nancy Pelosi almost certainly did some stuff that helped in Congress in getting the progressives to get on board, because we have to drag them kicking and screaming for almost anything. But yeah.
Go, Tiberius, do you have anything you wanted to jump in on saying this? I know you've been kind of quiet since earlier, but do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I'm kind of watching a Democrat feud right now, so I didn't really have anything to get in that. But I'll put it in this regard. I don't really level any kind of major feats at the hands of this administration. I did support the CHIPS Act, but when it came down to it, unfortunately, the CHIPS Act was too late. It didn't encourage anyone to build anything new. We just basically gave people big checks to basically recoup their costs for the investments that they were already doing. So if the goal was for more investment, we didn't really get much. If we're talking about the infrastructure bill, I agree with about 90% of it. Hilariously enough, Republicans got 90% of what they wanted out of it anyway and still decided not to vote for it, which blows my mind. I wish it was bigger, but overall, I mean, that's the biggest piece of legislation that I give not only to the Democrats, but to the Biden administration during this last 4 years, is that it did work. I'm still seeing it back home and in my new home, is all the money all the work that money's being paid for. That's actually making our roads better and our bridges better. It's real. It's wonderful. I wish we had more.
Yeah, I think the one thing too that I think is really interesting is recent news has come out. I think it was today actually, that the IRS union supported Kamala. And I tweeted out about this because I think a lot of people were kind of like, a lot of people were like, what? IRS supports Kamala. That means something's going on there at the IRS. I said, guys, wait a minute. We're forgetting one, and we're talking, and why this ties into y'all's conversation about the important pieces of legislation. There was a very controversial piece of legislation or funding that was passed to help fund the IRS. Let me put this in perspective for anybody who's unaware. The IRS is severely understaffed. And so would it not surprise you that the people that said, hey guys, we see you're understaffed, we're going to go ahead and fund you so that way we can bring in more staffing to help alleviate some of that stress for that worker who's working 12 hours a day because they're trying to process through the tax returns. Now it only has to work 8 hours. Is it kind of a surprise now to you that the IRS union has workers who go, yeah, I kind of like the guy who helps my job make it easier? It's not a surprise. But I kind of wanted to ask you guys this. Y'all guys are I'm assuming very pro-union. Where do you think that Kamala is going to stand? Do you think she's going to be a better candidate for unions, or do you think she's going to be a worse candidate? I only ask this in light of the fact that we saw the Teamsters union, and I really want to get y'all's opinion, more specifically to Wes and Ancom, where y'all stand on this whole Teamsters union debacle as well, because the Teamsters union came out, did this weird thing. We're like, hey, we're going to release a poll that shows Trump is in the lead, but we're not going to say that we support or don't support one or the other. It's like, so it left all the individual chapters kind of going like, what do we do? So where do you guys stand on that particular topic?
All right. So as far as the
Ansel, you
Teamsters
wanna-
situation, yeah. As far as the Teamsters situation, I know that one a little bit better because I just now heard about the NTEU endorsement. So as far as the Teamsters go, I did not hear about them releasing a poll or like showing a poll with Trump in the lead. That colors things a little bit. So when I first heard about the Teamsters overall saying we're not going to endorse anybody, I was actually kind of like I respected them for that because I think especially what happened with the rail situation in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, with Biden's administration and the legislature effectively breaking that strike. I was not happy about that. Now, ultimately, the demands of the rail workers did more or less get met, but the fact that they like legally broke the strike in order, before giving them any of those concessions, kind of pissed me off because like there was no guarantee that those concessions were going to happen. So I was rather annoyed by that. Then I
But you do
learned
admit
that
that
the
they-
actual rail workers of the Teamsters union are like, no, we're supporting Harris. I'm like, all right, well, the reason I support unions is I support workers, having control over, those sorts of elements of their workplace. And if they want to support Harris, who am I to argue with them? So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't necessarily think Harris is going to be better for unions than Biden was. I don't necessarily think she'll be worse. I do think both Biden and Harris are likely to be better for unions overall than Trump is. So that's kind of where I stand on that. It makes sense to me that unions tend to support a person who, for all her faults, seems to be fairly pro-union.
Wes, I'm going to go ahead and let Sansel go ahead and get in a word. He has to leave, and then we're going to start getting close to wrapping things up anyways, because we're getting close to about 8:20. So I like to kind of keep this show at about an hour and a half. And then after Sansel, we'll go ahead and get Wes's some takes on those union takes, because I'm kind of curious about those union takes. Go ahead, Sansel.
And thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm having to dip out a little early.
You're okay.
When it comes to whether Harris is going to be good or bad on unions, I think the fact that Harris is to the left of Biden, and Biden has been so staunchly pro-union, is probably some kind of indication where she'll be in terms of the union question. When it comes to the Teamsters, I also had not heard about them releasing some poll that showed that Donald Trump was in the lead. My understanding of that whole situation is is a big schism within the Teamsters on who to support. And so for the first time, the Teamsters didn't support anyone as like the whole organization, and the individual chapters are coming out and endorsing people. And I think that they're overwhelmingly going towards Harris. I think that when it comes to unions, the Democratic Party, at least as it is right now, is significantly better on unions than the Republican Party. The Democrat Party, for all their faults and all the things that lefties will hate them for, and there are legitimate criticisms, they're very pro-worker, and they've listened to the progressive wing of the party, and they have moved further left, as much as people want to criticize them for not. Like, if you look at the Democratic Party from the Obama years to the Democratic Party of 2016, and then you look at the Democratic Party now, like, we're in a whole new universe of not only domestic policy, not only like social policy, but foreign policy, economic policy, and worker policy. When it comes to the unions, like Ancom said, like, yeah, it kind of sucked at the time when the Biden administration was like, hey, we need to get the rail system back up, where everyone's really hurting. The economy's already kind of in a really fucked place. We could talk about this, but we got to get those rails moving right now. Immediately after that, they worked hard to pass legislation and to work with the rail union to get those concessions that they had been asking for. And I believe they got like 90% of what they asked for.
Yeah, they
like
got most of what they asked for, as I understand. So
Yeah,
I'm not mad about that. It was more the fact that, like, the whole point of the strike.
Real quick, Ancom, before
Oh,
we
I'm
I'm
still
fine with
very
it.
mad.
yeah, I want
No,
to say last thing. Yeah.
Sorry. go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, yeah, and I totally understand that point of view, especially as like a former lefty. Like, I am very, very still.
Wait,
very pro-union.
Sansol, pause. I'm
Yeah.
gonna catch you. You said former lefty. Are we
Yeah,
getting
I'm a
confused?
Hold on, really quick. When I say
Oh,
lefty,
okay,
I'm talking.
okay.
Yeah, I'm talking internet speak for socialists. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And as a
okay,
former
okay.
socialist, like, I'm still very pro-union, and I totally
Got
understand
me
the
worried.
sentiment.
I was like, do I need to send you a MAGA hat? I was getting worried. All right. I was like, hold on. Wait,
Listen.
how far are we going to the dark side?
Let me just
Sansol?
run over to my closet over here. Look at my collection of red and camo Trump hats. No, but yeah, no, I think that ultimately, like, even if you're a lefty, even if you're not involved, like, you're not super interested in electoral politics, like, if you're a socialist, you gotta respect what they've done with unions and the support that they've shown for unions. Even when I was a socialist, I was a big fan of, incrementalism, and let's do what we can now and move ourselves towards a better future. And I think that, like, conservatives, you guys got to find y'all's way. This is my final statement, okay? Conservatives, you guys got to find y'all's own way. I don't know how to help you guys anymore. I've tried so hard to be understanding and empathetic. I can't do it anymore. Lefties, I could be way more empathetic towards it because I understand exactly where you're coming from. And I would just encourage anyone that's listening that is further left than I am, like, man, you know what? You might not like the neoliberal, world order or anything like that, but damn, if the Democrats aren't doing way more of what you guys want than the Democrats of 4, 8, 10, 12 years ago would have done, and damn if they are like moving at a much further left position in terms of those like core issues to you guys socially and economically. Yeah, I think that that's something y'all should consider. But hey, guys, I do gotta
Yes,
run.
I got you, bro.
I love you guys very much, and it's been a very fun
Absolutely, man.
conversation.
Absolutely, bro. Take care. It was awesome having you on, Son. So I
All right.
appreciate it, man.
Catch you guys later.
Later, guy. Yeah. So before we pivot too far off here, because I want Wes to get in here. I want to mention there was the poll that was in question. The Teamsters released it. I had to get the exact numbers. They released a research phone poll with no data, which was even crazier to me, saying that Trump was ahead by 58% and Harris was 31%. This was Fox News reported on it, obviously, because Trump was in the lead on a union. And they did release, I think, some graphics and stuff, but that was what they came away with. And then when they saw that, I can't believe they released it on top of like saying, hey, we're not going to endorse anybody. And I had a lot of criticisms for this. I was like, why would you release a poll showing Trump ahead and then be like, hey, we're not endorsing anybody? It's like, you're kind of endorsing somebody by releasing a poll with Trump in the lead. Like, don't release the poll then. Just don't do that. Go ahead, Wes. I want to get you to get in here and say something because I know we were running a little short on time. But go ahead, Wes.
They've kind of been courting both sides the entire time. Like, they spoke the RNC, but then weren't even invited to the DNC, which is fucking weird from the DNC, in my opinion. But like, I am as leftist as I am. I believe that unions are a bipartisan issue, and like, I don't care. Like, as much as I think that I'm a socialist, you know, like I think that workers should own the company, but appealing to everybody is a necessity when you are the union. Like, any setting that is to unionize needs a 51% vote. And that 51% vote is very often going to include Republicans. So, like, when it comes to labor, we are like, there is no separation. We are the working class. And like, Republicans who are struggling are the same as me. I don't give a shit if you're a Republican, if you're a working class person, then you are the same as me and we have the same struggle.
We're not the same, Wes. We're not the same.
We are the same.
No,
You
no,
shut up and
Hey, look,
accept my hug.
I will.
We're all proletarians here, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We are all proletariats.
Wait,
Like,
maybe
there's,
not.
There's
Ty,
no bourgeoisie among us.
I don't know if Ty would join in on this hug fest. Okay, Tiberius is like, I want to watch it burn. Okay, Or- is
I
that
don't know.
right?
In my previous conversations with Ty, and if I'm giving shit away here, I apologize. But like, he's communicated to me in the past of being very pro-union himself. So you know, I think he would be more or less fine with this little hug fest.
Yeah, I'm not like.
What do you think about what I said? Am I wrong?
I'm not sure. Let me kind of arrange my thoughts in the way that I wanted to say them, because maybe I agree with you guys, some I don't. I'm generally pro-union. I'm not a pro-union 100% of the time. Sometimes they go too far, but I think unions are too weak. I definitely think they need bigger membership and more involvement. And I want to encourage that. When it comes to where politics are versus the union, let me split hairs here. On one side, we have to admit that unions are absolutely swing voters now. I've seen different numbers indicating different things, but here's the be-all, end-all with this. Number one, Trump gave unions what they've been asking for 40 fucking years, and that's tariffs. Now, granted, the Biden administration has continued quite a number of those, and it's even signaled to expand those. They have also said that they're generally pro-union, and Biden will even join the picket line from time to time. But his track record is either like...
No, it's anti-union.
Yeah, well, don't put words in my mouth. I'm going to put it this way. His track record's 50 at best, okay? He promised the pipe fitters that he was going to do Keystone, then killed it as soon as he was in office. He did not really side with the union on the railroad strike, because what their rationale was pretty reasonable, but unfortunately, I don't think he really knew what was going on and was not advised well on that particular issue. I think there was a better way forward. However, he has actually tried, the first Democrat in my lifetime to actually try to keep the unions even happy, to where he's like trying to rebuild the boat and re-weld the steel of the boat of the Democratic Party to be pro-union. Biden's trying, and I'm not going to dissuade from that, although I think he could have done better. The issue is, going forward, I do not think that the union vote is going to remain Democrat or even swing. I think it's going to go to Republicans. And the reason why is for the same reason that big business left the Republican Party. The Republican Party is toxic. I'm not going to dissuade from that. But they are coalescing around like 3 issues that are pretty much all of the culture war, which unions don't bother with. And what every time we turn around, even though the union leadership generally hates Trump, and I don't disagree with that, is that the membership largely is pretty split on the guy, because he was the guy who got what they wanted for the first time. He did have at least a decent economy from what they remember, and he actually was trying to, press the buttons. He got things moving again. When it comes to Biden, I think he tried, but let's look at where Harris is. Harris is a California Democrat who got known as an AG for arresting people for pot and truancy. This is a California Democrat. If she turns and actually bees pros union, I will shit a brick, because I guarantee it, whenever she gets into office and she's looking at who gave her big money versus who gave her votes, she's going to side with the big money. She's going to get with like former Republicans and California Wall Street folks, and she's going to be raking in the cash. Or the union's like, hey, what are you doing for me? And the answer is Trump is going to be there, or his replacement is going to be there, saying, I want to be there for you. And Democrats are probably going to be crickets. I hope I'm wrong. That would be kind of cool. But I just don't see the coalition that now has big business, unions, socialists, and Greens being politically solvent going into the future. And somebody's going to get kicked. I think it'll be socialists first and then unions right behind them, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think the one thing that I could say is that Kamala definitely seems like she is very much pro-union. I think she is really riding a little bit off of Biden's coattails a little bit, but I think she has a lot of unique traits. And I think here's how we'll kind of wrap this up in a little bit of bow tie, because we're running a little bit short on time, is I think that when it comes to kind of come back to the original point of the economy and tying it into unions a little bit, I have seen nothing but endorsements for Harris. I have seen endorsement after endorsement after endorsement after endorsement. Guys, I haven't seen almost any endorsements for Harris or for Trump. And I mean, like, I'm sitting here and I'm going, and and it's wild to me to see the MAGA base go, oh, well, that's because they're establishment. It's like, yeah, but when you had this many endorsements and you only have the endorsement of like RFK and what is it, Nikki Haley or whatever her name was, so Gabbard, I think it's Gabbard. Anyways,
Gabbard, yeah.
Yeah, Gabbard. I always mix Gabbard and Haley up for some stupid reason. It's like, at what point do you realize you're on an island? And then like now Harris it's come out that after the Oprah Winfrey show, she managed to rake in $100 million. Like, what the hell? I mean, guys, listen, I'm gonna stake a prediction out there. Now, I'm not saying this with all the other guests, and okay, this is not there. I do not speak for the further guests, but I will tell you, okay, I'm going with the blue wave, baby. Okay, I'm going with the blue wave. All right. I think that looking at what's going on in Texas right now, that all red is 1 percentage point ahead. North Carolina's governor race looks like it's going to be a runaway for a Democrat. I mean, it's amazing to me. Florida's got an abortion ticket on the ballot. Look, I'm being a little optimistic. I get it. And I think it's amazing to watch Harris. Harris has sat there and she's saying that, look, we're the underdog. And it's so funny to me to hear her say that. And I think because what she's trying to do is trying to say, look, guys, I know that I'm winning, but if I say that I'm winning, y'all aren't going to show up. So we're the underdog. Show up. But, on the economy note, I think there's all sorts of markers that indicate that the Kamala Harris and Biden administration's economics are doing great. A lot of people hate me when I say that inflation is down because they go, oh, what? It's at 2.5%. Guys, the highest it was at 9%. Anybody who thinks that prices are going down are delusional. The days of 90-cent gasoline and $70,000 homes are gone. Why? Because inflation exists. The ideal inflation rate is about 2%. So anybody who wants to sit here and go, well, Kamala Harris and inflation, no shit. Okay. Those days are gone. The days that you expect if Trump sits there and says that you want those prices to go back down, they're not going to go back down. Okay. They may go down a little bit. Okay. Individual prices may go down. Okay. But not all of them. And it's going to be kind of within a certain margin of error or margin that it's going to go down. Okay. We're not talking.
If I can interrupt real quick.
Yeah. Go. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So whenever people talk about inflation, I recognize, like you do, inflation, like, we're not going to go deflationary. We are so dead set against deflation, which is prices going down. That's never going to happen. So what I care about isn't inflation or deflation. It is about purchasing power, which is inflation and wage growth. It is the balance of inflation and wage growth. So when people are saying that, yeah, inflation is down, and you're right, year over year, this most recent report puts it at 2.5%. If we look at the total inflation from like early 2020, say March 2020, and then look at wage growth over that same time, we're still in a worse position overall. And so I think that is the issue. And people, people may have an intuitive idea of that, but can't articulate it. But I think that is something that we need to pay more attention to, is what does the wage versus inflation picture look like? And right now, we're still not back where we were pre-pandemic. We're getting closer.
Sure.
Wage growth does seem to be outpacing inflation at present. And if that is a trend that continues, then we will eventually be better off. But we need to keep that in mind, that inflation's not the only thing that we need to worry about here. So that's all I wanted to point out.
No, 100%. Let me ask you this, Wes. I'm going to let you guys kind of get off your final statements on what you think about Harris and the economy, and if you think she's going to do really well with the economy, or even unions, if you want to kind of go back there. I know we kind of went off a little bit on tangent on that, but Wes, go ahead and give your final thoughts on your outro here.
I don't think there's going to be a noticeable change in anybody's life with or without Kamala. Either way, I think union relations are basically going to stay the same, and we're still going to be fighting for our rights as workers. I fail to see. I know Biden likes to say that he's like the most pro-union president ever, but then he shut down the rail workers strike. And I know that people see Kamala as left of him, but I don't, for any reason. And I don't know. I just don't think shit's really going to change that much either way. I think the answer is that we all have to organize more in our actual local community. And
the dog farted, y'all. I'm sorry. I just want to let y'all know it stinks and it's bad. Okay, I'm dying over here, and she's sitting right under my chair, man. Okay,
this is what you get for streaming from the dog house. I assume that's why it's called the Dog House Show.
And it's becoming the dog shit show really quickly. Okay, it just smells so bad.
Oh god.
It's bad. Tiberius, is there anything you wanted to wrap up on any of these topics, or anything you wanted to kind of mention on last round?
Well, I don't know if y'all can hear me very well, but I at least try to make my point. Yeah, it's as clear as I could. The long and the short here is that when it comes to the economy, if you are in big oil, if you're working for Exxon, or you're invested with Exxon or some company like that, Halliburton, BP, whatever those, you're probably going to want to vote Trump. If you're in green tech to a large degree, you build solar panels, you install those, windmills, that kind of thing, you're probably going to want to vote Harris. If you're union, I don't really have a good recommendation for you, because this could go 50-50 either way pretty quickly for me. One's got a track record, the other one doesn't. One has promises, the other one is full of shit. I just don't even know where to start with that. As far as the general economy, I expect no matter who wins, truthfully, the economy is going to get largely better. There will be some issues going forward. I think we do have a massive problem of looking at inflation down the barrel again, because we didn't fix most of our problems from 2020. But I don't think that's going to be the fault of anyone who wins the election. This has been 40 years, if not more, in the making, and we haven't fully learned our lesson yet. So if we see inflation again, wasn't the fact that you voted wrong. It was just because it was coming down the pipe anyway. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, not a problem. Thank you so much, Tiberius. So guys, here's what we're going to do. We were going to do a call in. It didn't look like we have anybody in there. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to wrap up the show. I would definitely love to talk to you guys more about the Israel and Lebanon thing going on. There's a lot of developments going on over there. I want to say that I think that we're going to definitely probably see some kind of a strike. We've already seen some rocket strikes going on over there. So it's something to keep an eye on. What I will do is I want to give a huge shout out to Ancom, Wesley, and Tiberius D. You guys check them out. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification bell, so you know when we go live. If you're on Twitter, please hit that like button and also follow me. I am so close to 500 followers on Twitter. If you are on TikTok, even though I'm not live on TikTok, but if I have a clip that goes up on TikTok, make sure you follow me there as well. And guys, I tell you what, I am doing amazing on TikTok. It is amazing. But anyways, I'm not doing any Taylor Swift songs. I might do one just to piss off Tiberius. But anyways, guys, it has been an awesome time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and y'all have a good one. If you are on my stream, make sure you also hit that follow button on Twitch. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end